What happens when a successful millionaire crosses paths with a struggling mother in a shelter? The unlikely encounter leads to an emotional revelation that changes both their lives forever. In the heart of a bustling city, the lives of two seemingly unrelated individuals were about to collide in the most unexpected way. Peter Blackwell, a wealthy millionaire and owner of a sprawling tech empire, had everything a man could dream of: luxury, success, and power. Yet, despite his material wealth, Peter felt a deep and unshakable loneliness. His massive mansion, adorned with all the finest furnishings and surrounded by lush gardens, was eerily quiet, reflecting the emptiness within him. His days were filled with meetings, conference calls, and endless work, but none of it could fill the void he felt after the sudden death of his wife, Claire. 5 years earlier, he lived in solitude, refusing to allow anyone close enough to breach the walls he had built around his heart. Maya Dawson, on the other hand, was a woman struggling to survive. A single mother to her 7-year-old daughter, Lily, she found herself in a shelter after losing her job at a local diner. Maya had always worked hard to provide for Lily, but her circumstances seemed to spiral downward after her husband's tragic death in a car accident. Life in the shelter was tough, but Maya was determined to give her daughter a better future, no matter the cost. One cold afternoon, as part of his company's charitable initiative, Peter was scheduled to visit a local shelter. The visit, though obligatory, was the last thing on his mind. He had never fully embraced the idea of charity, believing that money alone couldn't solve the problems of the world. But his board members insisted, and so he reluctantly agreed to meet a few residents. The shelter, with its rows of cots and dim lighting, was a stark contrast to the lavish life Peter led. As he walked through the narrow hallways, his gaze fell upon a woman sitting quietly in a corner, holding her daughter's hand. Maya, with her weary eyes and quiet demeanor, seemed different from the others. Her face, though tired, radiated a strength and resolve that caught Peter's attention. Maya, sensing the gaze of the stranger, glanced up. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and in that fleeting instant, a connection was formed, a silent understanding that transcended words. But Peter quickly turned away, not wanting to show any vulnerability. Little did he know, this encounter would set off a chain of events that would forever change both their lives. Peter returned to his mansion that evening, the day's events already fading from his mind. He didn't think much of his brief encounter with Maya, chalking it up to a passing moment, but something about her lingered in his thoughts. He had seen countless people living in shelters, yet Maya's strength, her quiet dignity, stood out to him. Perhaps it was because of his own loss, but the connection he had felt was undeniable, though he wouldn't admit it to himself. Meanwhile, Maya's day was far from over. She returned to the shelter, carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. That night, as Lily slept peacefully beside her, Maya found herself staring at the ceiling, wondering how much longer she could hold on to hope. She thought of all the broken promises and dreams that seemed so far out of reach, but in the back of her mind, there was a small spark of something, a glimmer of belief that one day, things would get better. She just had to keep pushing forward. The next morning, Peter's life would be unexpectedly intertwined with Maya's once again. He was invited back to the shelter for another charitable event. This time, however, he was given a task that would lead him deeper into Maya's world. Peter arrived at the shelter with the same sense of detachment that had accompanied him during his previous visit. The residents, mostly families, were used to seeing wealthy individuals come and go, offering empty smiles and handing out donations with no real connection to the people they were helping. But this time, something was different. As Peter walked through the shelter's entrance, Maya stood in the hallway, organizing supplies with a few volunteers. Their eyes met once again, and this time Maya didn't turn away. She gave him a nod of acknowledgement, her expression soft but reserved. Peter, for the first time in years, found himself at a loss for words. He didn't know why, but something about Maya's presence had an effect on him. Her quiet strength, her resilience, spoke volumes. He had never expected to be moved by a person in a shelter, let alone someone as dignified as Maya. As the event unfolded, Peter was tasked with helping distribute supplies. Maya, as one of the shelter's key volunteers, was working alongside him. Their brief interactions were polite, but Peter couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Maya than met the eye. Over the following weeks, Peter began to visit the shelter more frequently. Each visit, although initially driven by charity, brought him closer to Maya. He started to notice the small details about her life, the way she would tirelessly work with the other volunteers, always with a smile, even when she was clearly exhausted. Her bond with the children in the shelter was undeniable, especially with Lily, who looked up to her mother with adoration and trust. Peter found himself spending more time in conversations with Maya, though they were often brief and never personal. Maya, too, seemed to let her guard down around him. There was something about Peter's genuine concern, something in his eyes that spoke of the pain he had carried for years. And while she remained wary of his wealth and privilege, she saw a side of him that contrasted with the faceless donors who passed through the shelter. One evening, as they sat on a bench outside the shelter, Peter offered Maya a ride home. She hesitated, knowing that crossing the line of professionalism could complicate things, but something about the offer felt different. Maybe it was the weariness in her heart, or the sheer unpredictability of the moment. The ride to Maya's modest apartment was silent at first. Peter couldn't help but observe the difference between her world and his. As they drove through the streets, passing grand homes and mansions, Peter's thoughts turned inward. Maya had already seen the vast disparity between their lives, but there was a momentary discomfort in him, an awareness of his privilege that made him question everything. As they neared her apartment, Maya turned to him with a faint, guarded smile. She spoke of her struggles, though she did so with quiet humility. She mentioned her late husband, how he had worked tirelessly to support their family, only to be taken away too soon. She spoke of how she had to learn to navigate the world of survival on her own, all the while making sure Lily felt loved and secure. Peter listened intently, struck by the strength and resilience in Maya's voice. After a moment of silence, Maya turned to him. "It's not easy, but we do what we have to do for the ones we love." Her words lingered with Peter long after she had exited the car. Something about her vulnerability made him reconsider the choices he had made in his own life. Over the next few days, Peter's thoughts continued to swirl around Maya and her quiet strength. He found himself restless at work, distracted by the image of her tired smile and the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about Lily. Maya's life, full of struggle and perseverance, stood in stark contrast to his own. His wealth, his lifestyle, all of it suddenly seemed so distant and empty. He had everything, and yet, in that moment, he realized he had nothing that truly mattered. One afternoon, Maya mentioned that she needed some time off from the shelter. Peter, without thinking, offered to help. He knew it was impulsive, but there was something within him that urged him to act. Maya, though hesitant, agreed. She had never allowed anyone to help her before, and the thought of accepting his offer made her uneasy. But for once, she allowed herself the space to breathe. As the days passed, their bond grew. Peter began to spend more time at the shelter, not just to offer financial support, but because he genuinely cared about what Maya was doing. Slowly, Maya began to let her guard down, trusting him with pieces of her past and glimpses into her future. Their worlds started to merge in a way that neither of them could have predicted. One evening, Peter joined Maya for a walk after the shelter's evening shift. As they strolled through the city streets, Maya spoke of her dreams for Lily and for herself. She had always wanted to start her own small business, but the burden of survival had kept those dreams at bay. Peter listened intently, hearing the raw yearning in her voice. It wasn't just about survival. It was about creating a life that was fulfilling, something that could provide more than just the basics. As they walked through the park, Peter found himself lost in the thought of what it would be like to be in her shoes, to experience life with the passion, the will to fight for a better future. It was something he'd never fully grasped, not until now. Without warning, Maya stopped walking and turned to him. She had been hesitant to talk about her late husband before, but now she felt the need to share. She spoke of his dream of opening a community center for children, a place where they could be safe and loved. Maya's voice quivered as she shared how her husband's death had shattered that dream. But even in the face of loss, Maya was determined to keep that dream alive for Lily, for him, and for every child who needed it. The evening air grew colder as Maya and Peter walked toward the community center site, where Maya had once hoped to start her dream. The sounds of the city faded into the distance, leaving only the rustling of leaves and the quiet hum of the world around them. Maya's voice was steady, but Peter could sense a depth of pain behind her words. as she shared the final chapter of her husband's life, a chapter she had never fully opened up to anyone before. Maya's husband, David, had been an artist, a man full of ideas and dreams. He was the heart and soul of everything Maya had ever believed in, and losing him had felt like losing the future. He had always dreamed of helping children, of giving them a place to feel safe and loved. But after his passing, Maya had to face the harsh reality that the dream would never come true without the support they had once imagined. As Maya spoke, Peter's heart ached. He could feel the weight of her loss, the tremendous courage it took to keep going. But there was something else, something stirring in him. He wasn't just moved by her story, he was driven. The idea that her dreams, once so close to realization, had been put on hold for so long left him with a sense of urgency. This was his moment to act. This was the moment to make things right. The words hung heavy in the air between them as Peter stood silently, letting the magnitude of Maya's story sink in. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to be connected to something greater than himself. Maya's strength, her relentless fight to survive and to keep hope alive for her daughter and for the community, was something he had never experienced before. She had a fire inside her, a drive that wasn't born from wealth, but from love. Peter's thoughts raced. He couldn't help but wonder how many other dreams had been abandoned because people, like Maya, had no means of bringing them to life. But now, he saw the potential. This dream, her dream, was something he could help bring to fruition. Breaking the silence, Peter turned to Maya with a resolve in his eyes. He told her he wanted to help her build that community center. He didn't want to just be a donor, he wanted to be involved, to take the lead in making this vision a reality. He could see it now, as vividly as she had described it. The community center, a place where children could learn, grow, and find hope, was something worth fighting for. Maya stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment, she could hardly comprehend what he was saying. Could this really be happening? Could her dreams be coming back to life after so many years? Maya's heart raced as Peter's words sank in. She had spent years on her own, struggling to keep her hope alive, facing rejection, and fighting the feeling that her dreams were too big for her to achieve. But here was Peter, a man who had everything: wealth, success, influence, yet in this moment, he was offering her the one thing she had never imagined: his support, not just as a benefactor but as a partner. Her emotions were a whirlwind. She had spent so much time burying her grief, hiding her vulnerability, that she had forgotten what it felt like to truly trust someone. But Peter's offer wasn't just about money. It was about belief in her dream, in the potential of this community. It was the kind of belief she had been searching for all these years. Tears welled in her eyes as she found her voice. "You really mean it, don't you?" she asked softly, unable to mask the tremor in her voice. Peter nodded, his expression firm but filled with empathy. "I've seen what you've been through, Maya," he said, his voice unwavering. "Your strength, your heart, they deserve a chance to grow. I want to be a part of that." In that moment, Maya knew that her journey was just beginning. The air between them seemed to thicken as Maya and Peter stood on the precipice of something monumental. Maya couldn't believe how quickly everything had changed, how, in an instant, the course of her life had shifted from one of constant struggle to one of potential and hope. This was more than just a partnership. It was a lifeline. As they spoke further, Peter's determination grew even stronger. He promised to bring in his team, his connections, and his resources. He assured Maya that no dream was too big if they had the right people behind it. And Peter was convinced that together, they could build something beautiful for the children and families who needed it most. For the first time in years, Maya felt a spark of excitement she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Could they really make this happen? Could this man, whose life was so different from hers, truly understand the impact this could have on her community? She had doubted so many people before, but Peter's sincerity and passion were undeniable. As the conversation continued, Peter shared a vision for the future. Maya could see it now: the community center, buzzing with activity, children laughing, learning, thriving. It wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a plan, and together, they would make it a reality. As the days passed, the ripple effect of Peter's decision became undeniable. The small acts of kindness and support he had shown Maya were transforming her life in ways she hadn't thought possible. It wasn't just the funding for the community center. It was the sense of hope, the belief that someone cared, and that her struggles had been seen. Maya had always been a fighter, but now she felt like she was fighting with an army behind her. She threw herself into organizing meetings, planning logistics, and finding more people who shared her vision. With Peter's guidance, her ideas were beginning to take shape, becoming something tangible, a future she could touch. At the same time, Peter found himself looking at his own life in a new light. The journey to success had been a lonely one for him, marked by sacrifice and solitude. But in supporting Maya, he had found a sense of purpose that had long been missing. Seeing the transformation in Maya and her community reignited something inside him. He realized that giving wasn't just about money or power. It was about sharing a piece of yourself to make the world a little better. The weeks grew into months, and the progress on the community center was undeniable. Walls were painted, floors were tiled, and the construction site buzzed with workers who believed in what they were building. Maya, now at the helm of this transformation, felt a sense of pride she had never experienced. Every detail of the center was carefully planned to reflect the dreams of the children and families it would serve. Peter visited often, his role evolving from a backer to a true partner in this endeavor. He had become a frequent presence at the construction site, talking to workers, offering advice, and listening to Maya's vision. He even attended the community meetings, offering guidance on how to engage more families and secure additional resources. As they stood side by side, watching the center take form, Maya couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The community, once struggling, was now buzzing with anticipation. People who had been skeptical about the project were beginning to see its value. They believed in it now, and more importantly, they believed in themselves. Maya had never expected this level of transformation, not just in her community, but in herself. She was no longer just a woman with a dream. She was a leader, an inspiration. And Peter, a man who had once been distant and withdrawn, had become her most trusted ally. Months passed since the first brick was laid in the construction of the community center. The once abandoned plot of land now stood proudly as a beacon of change, a symbol of Maya's dedication and Peter's unexpected journey towards selflessness. The center was now open, bustling with children, adults, and families all coming together under its roof. Maya walked through its halls, every inch of it a reminder of the hard work, struggles, and victories that had gotten them here. Peter, too, had changed. No longer a distant millionaire, he had become a familiar face in the community, participating in events and supporting local causes. It wasn't just the money he had contributed that mattered, but the investment he had made in the people, in their lives. His transformation mirrored Maya's as he slowly found peace within himself. Through the joy he saw in the people's faces, through their successes, he found his own redemption. Maya's son, Leo, was now thriving. His joy was infectious, and Maya could see the bright future ahead of him. What she had fought for, what had seemed impossible just a year ago, was now her reality. And every time she looked at Peter, she saw not just the man who had helped her build the center, but someone who had found his own purpose in helping others. The opening ceremony of the community center had been a grand event, a culmination of months of hard work and determination. Maya stood before a crowd of smiling faces, thanking them all for believing in her vision. But as she spoke, she realized that the real thank you wasn't in her words. It was in the smiles of the people she had helped, in the children running around the center, in the parents chatting about future possibilities. Peter stood next to her, watching with quiet pride. The transformation in him was undeniable. The man who had once been closed off and consumed by his wealth was now open, involved, and grounded. He had learned that true fulfillment came from sharing, not just financially, but emotionally and mentally as well. The community had given him more than he could have ever given them in return. It was in those moments of connection that he realized his true purpose. Later that evening, as the last guests left, Maya and Peter stood together, reflecting on everything they had accomplished. Maya turned to him with gratitude in her eyes. "You changed my life," she said softly, knowing it was an understatement. Peter simply smiled, knowing that what they had built was far more than just a structure, it was a legacy. As the weeks continued to pass, Peter became more involved in the community. No longer just a financial backer, he took on a mentorship role, guiding local entrepreneurs and young adults eager to learn. The community center became more than just a building. It became a gathering place for knowledge, support, and growth. Peter's efforts began to inspire those around him, and many of the center's success stories could be traced back to his guidance. Maya, too, was finding fulfillment. With the center flourishing, she had more time to focus on her own aspirations. She began to take evening classes in social work, determined to equip herself with the knowledge and skills to further her mission. She wanted to ensure the community center was sustainable long into the future, and she was learning that her passion for giving back could extend beyond what she had originally imagined. Leo, now thriving, had a newfound sense of confidence. His once reserved nature was replaced with a spark of curiosity and eagerness to learn. The community center had become his second home, where he could explore, learn, and grow surrounded by love and care. Maya watched him with pride, knowing she had given him the foundation for a bright and successful future. One afternoon, as the sun set over the newly built center, Peter and Maya stood together on the balcony overlooking the bustling community. Maya smiled, seeing the fruits of their labor all around her, while Peter stood silently, a sense of peace finally settling over him. He had never imagined that a single decision to step into that shelter would lead to this a life full of connection, growth, and purpose. "I never thought I'd be here," Peter admitted softly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I never thought I'd find meaning in anything but work and money." Maya looked at him with understanding. "Sometimes, the greatest journey is the one we take toward each other. It's not always about giving, but about learning to receive, too." Peter nodded, the weight of his past lifting just a little more. "You've changed my life, Maya," he said, his voice sincere. And with that, the final chapter of their shared story was written not with grand gestures or monumental events, but with small, everyday moments of understanding, connection, and love. The community center continued to thrive, a testament to the fact that sometimes it's the most unexpected of meetings that lead to the most beautiful of transformations.